Back in 1994, I got married for the first time at the ripe young age of 44. Slow learner. Would you agree? Anybody else a slow learner like me? So I got married to Deborah, and Deborah always said to me, honey, it's a package deal. You get me, you get Bennett, and you get Michael. Well, when I married Deborah, Bennett was 8.5, and Michael was 12.5. Stepdad. What a great job. Not. Some of you step-parents out there understand this, right? Well, I had been in this relationship for 6 years. 6 years, and I was still having a hard time trying to communicate with Bennett. Bond with Bennett. And let me explain something about Bennett. Bennett and I could not be more different. I am an extrovert. He is an introvert. I am creative. He is linear. I'm verbal. He is an engineer. But because I'm me and Bennett's Bennett, we did not speak the same language. We did not have the same rhythms. We were just like two aliens living in the same house. But our conversations had gone from conversations to verbal boxing matches. Now, some of you aren't step-parents and you know what I'm talking about. But we didn't have conversations. We sparred. Who could be smarter? Who could be better? Who could win the conversation? It was just this. And I looked at this and I thought, oh my gosh, this is me and my dad when I was his age. And this is not okay with me. So I went to Deborah and I'm like, honey, Bennett, alien from outer space. I'm not. What can I do? Well, Deborah, the queen of self-help books, goes to her bookshelf, pulls out a book, and she says, here is a quote that I would like you to consider. Make what is important to the other person as important to you as the other person is. Make what is important to the other person as important to you as the other person is. I've got to make what is important to Bennett as important to me as Bennett is. So I took this to heart and I thought, okay, cool. I'm gonna like start really paying attention to Bennett. What's Bennett into? Okay, well, Bennett comes home from high school, opens the front door, and grazes and sheds his way through the house. Do you have any kids who shed their way through the house? The backpack, shoes, stuff on the kitchen. It's like I never saw anybody take up so much space in so little time. But he would come in and he would just like plop everything down, go to the refrigerator, hang out, get everything he could, go down, plop on the couch, and watch Gilligan's Island and Star Trek for an hour. Make what is important to the other person. Gilligan's Island and Star Trek? How am I supposed to bond with him on that? And then I would watch him, and he would go from Gilligan's Island and Star Trek into his desk, sit down at his desk, and pop up video games. So I thought, video games, this is going to be my thing. I'm going to like sit down. So I said, Bennett, I've never played a video game. Could you teach me how to play a video game? Okay. So I sat down next to him at his desk, and we started to try and... Have any of you tried to play video games with your kids? It was a little bit weird for me, because he's sitting there going, okay, so up in this corner there's this thing, and if you do this, and it charges, and it gets 17 more of those, and then if you do this over here, it deletes things from here, and it's like 27 levels of complexity up here. They're like avionics or something. And I'm looking at this screen, and he's down, I'm going, which, is it the left button on the mouse or the right button on the... Well, he just got so disgusted with me that I finally walked away, and I thought, okay, that's not going to cut it. But I kept paying attention to what he was into, and it's like he's always on computer. He's downloading software programs and applications. And then the next day I come home, and he's got a computer on the family room floor taken apart, and it's in parts all over the floor. Bennett, is that my computer? Is that my computer? No, it's not your computer. It's not. I got a computer from Jason. He works at the used computer store. I got it for $5. Well, what are you doing? I'm looking to see how the component parts interface. Okay. Engineer boy. I didn't get it. But I watched him go through this process, and then 3 days later, he's on the internet ordering parts to build his own computer from parts. He's 15. He just figured it out by himself. So I'm thinking to myself, computers, somehow I've got to somehow bond with him on computers. Only one problem. I'm a moron on computers. I'm always worried about deleting my hard drive. I mean, I just don't get it. But at the same time, I had to build a website for my business. And so I had this guy, George, come over to my house. And George was a website designer. We're sitting at the kitchen table. We're having a cup of coffee. We're talking about website design and how it works and how much it's going to cost. And Bennett comes upstairs. Oh, Bennett, this is George. He designs websites. Oh, George, you know what? Bennett is building his own computer. All of a sudden, they're having a conversation in some language I didn't understand. Megahertz and gigahertz and liverwurst. And like all of a sudden, they just get up and they disappear and they go off downstairs and they're hanging out for like a half hour. Then they come back upstairs and we have a nice little, close to the evening. And I decide I'm going to hire George. And George leaves and Bennett says, are you going to hire him? He's really cool. Are you going to hire him? Yeah, I'm going to hire him. Really? How much do you pay a guy like that? How much do you pay a guy to do websites? $25 an hour. And there, the plan was hatched. I don't speak Bennett's language, but George does. What if I hire George and he becomes the translator between the two of us and I have George actually teach Bennett how to do website design and then I can sit there and we can kind of like hang out together and do this whole thing. So I went to Bennett and I said, I have this great idea. You would be a great website designer. Why don't I hire George and I pay George to do this, but as he's building it, he'll teach you how to do this and at a certain point, we'll let George go and you can be the website designer. You could actually make a living sitting at your own desk designing websites. How much did you say you were paying George? $25 an hour. How much are you going to pay me? I was thinking $10 an hour. You're paying him $25. Why are you paying me? Bennett, Taco Bell, or website design. Okay, fine. So finally, George comes over. We had figured out what we're going to do. George and Bennett and I are sitting at Bennett's desk building a website. They're exchanging information. I'm collaborating with them, telling them what's going on. Within 3 weeks, Bennett had learned HTML and we didn't need George anymore. Little genius. Little genius. This guy was amazing. So we cut George loose and then all of a sudden, I sat down at Bennett's desk next to Bennett. We started having a very different conversation. We were collaborating on a business project more as equals. He needed me for my ideas and my resources and my money. I needed him to execute my ideas and my visions about my website. And as we were sitting there day after day, hours, doing all this conversation back and forth, our conversations evolved out of website design into, so what's going on in your life? And how are you doing? And do you have a girlfriend? You do? And we had an incredible relationship after that, and that was the breakthrough in our relationship. And what I learned from that experience is exactly what Deborah had given me from that book. Make what is important to the other person as important to you as the other person is. In other words, sit at their desk. Now let me just ask you, do you have anybody as a leader that you've got to work with, a subordinate, a coworker, a colleague, an employee, a direct report, somebody that is in your employ and you know you have to interface with them. You need to get along with them, but they're like an alien from another planet to you. They're a completely different learning style and personality style. Does anybody have somebody that comes to mind like that you work with? My challenge for you is if you want to align with their higher aspirations and moral convictions, if you want them to commit to you at a level that no one's ever committed to you, don't invite them into your office. Sit at their desk. Now, that is a story theater story, and story theater is the format that I use to create and craft stories. Did you see the movie just now of Bennett and I and sitting at the desk and the computer on the floor? Did you see the imagery? If that imagery and that emotion sticks with you, it will remind you of sit at their desk, which is the phrase that summarizes the lesson.